Yo, what's up guys? So today we're going to be doing my 2023 mid-season driver rankings. So we're going to go through every driver on the grid and rank them from worst to best and just discuss how their season's been so far. So keep in mind I've taken everything into consideration for these. That includes their performances in qualifying, the sprint shootouts, the sprints, and the races, as well as how good they've done against their teammates, and of course how well they've done in relation to their car performance. Okay, so let's get into it. Starting off with my lowest rated driver, coming in at 21st is of course Nyck de Vries. AlphaTauri brought him in with the sole intention of being able to match and even beat Yuki, but he fell completely short of that, nowhere near the pace of Yuki for every qualifying and race, and also having a lot of mistakes that you wouldn't expect from an experienced driver like Nyck. Yes, it was his first season in Formula 1, but he's got that experience from Formula E, from Formula 2, as a reserve driver, even his first F1 race. And it just didn't correlate into his season at all. Yes, it is a bit unfortunate he didn't get until the end of the year or even the summer break to be able to prove himself, but I think Red Bull had seen enough from him. And it made a lot more sense to be able to bring Daniel in to compare him to Yuki for the rest of the year. So with that said, it only makes sense to put Nyck here in 21st, and I don't see any other driver doing worse than him for the rest of the season. Next up, in 20th, I've got Logan Sargeant. Now, yes, he is a rookie in a Williams against a teammate like Alex Albon, but we've seen the talent that has come from rookies in the past, from the likes of Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and even now Oscar Piastri. And Williams hasn't been terrible this year. They've had a chance at points for many races, and he's still yet to get one. His best result was obviously the 11th in Britain, but other than that, he's hardly finished outside of the bottom 5. And he's also made a fair few mistakes, but I wouldn't say he's had as bad of a rookie season as we've seen from some drivers in recent years. Again, I don't think he's had a terrible season for a rookie, but I just don't think I can rate him much higher than this. Next up, in 19th, I've got Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen has had a horrific season. I was even considering rating him in 20th below Logan Sargeant. It wasn't until I saw his 2 10th places that made me think, okay, well, at least he's got some points, despite that Haas having awful race pace. But overall, Magnussen has been a huge letdown. He's been getting absolutely outqualified by Hulkenberg. I will, however, say Magnussen hasn't been so bad on race pace in comparison to Nico. I believe there's been about 5 races that Magnussen has outpaced Hulkenberg, which is surprising considering how high up the grid Hulkenberg has been starting. But overall, with the amount of experience Magnussen has and considering this is second year with these new regular cars and it's only Hulkenberg's first, it has been very disappointing. Next up, in 18th, I've got Zhou Guanyu. I don't think Zhou's had a terrible season, but he's just been there. He's had nothing special at all. And overall, I think Bottas has just edged him. Yes, the Alfa Romeo has been a bit weird this year, and he's gotten 2 nice results in Australia and Spain with 9th place. But overall, I do think the Alfa Romeo has had some races where I expected them to do better, and Zhou just under-delivered. Again, not a terrible season, but I just don't think he's had any standout moment for me. So that's why I've got him in 18th place. Next up, in 17th, I've got Lance Stroll. Now, the Aston Martin came out of the gates firing, but Stroll was still lacking a lot of pace in comparison to Alonso. He did have that injury at the start of the year, so I was going to give him 3 races to get up to speed. But then it all started to fall to bits. Other teams started to catch up. As Aston Martin has started to drop back, I feel like Stroll got worse and worse, started to make more mistakes, started to drop even further off of Alonso. There was only one race where I generally thought he had better pace than Alonso, and that was Spain. But when you think Alonso's getting all these podiums, out-racing Lance by 30 seconds, out-qualifying him by a lot as well, it's been a very, very disappointing season. And honestly, I think Stroll is going to let down Aston Martin majorly in the Constructors' Championship at the end of the year. His best result this season was a 4th in Australia, where he made a mistake, went off, and got saved by a red flag. So with that said, I can't rate Stroll higher than 17th. Next up, in 16th, I have got Valtteri Bottas. Now, some people may be surprised why I rated him above Zhou and even Lance Stroll, but I don't think Bottas has done too bad this season. Yes, very inconsistent and not to Bottas's level, but he's just edged out Zhou in performance this season. Again, not amazing for Bottas's standards, but I don't think as bad as people have made it out to be. And in a lot of the races this year, I'd look at the back marker teams and drivers and think, wow, okay, Bottas did the best out of them. And that's why I've got him where he is. Next up, at 15th, I've got Daniel Ricciardo. Yes, he's only done 2 races this season, but that 1 race in Hungary and that sprint shootout and sprint in Belgium, for me, put him ahead of the drivers I ranked below. That weekend in Hungary, out-qualifying Yuki, getting taken out on the first lap, clawing his way back through the field and finishing 13th was amazing. So look, I can't rank him higher than this obviously, but I am happy to put him above the guys below. If he can keep up that performance that he had in Hungary and the sprint Saturday in Belgium, I think he can have a really, really good end to the season. All right, now it's time to get to the nitty gritty. In 14th, I have got Sergio Perez. Now, when you look at Perez's season so far, getting a few seconds and even those 2 first places, you might be thinking, why is he ranked so low? But you've got to remember, he's got the fastest car on the grid by a mile. Yes, he's being compared to the likes of Max Verstappen, but you need to be finishing in second or at the very least on the podium every single Grand Prix. And for a span of 6 races, he didn't finish second. Even if he finished second in every single Grand Prix, he still wouldn't have a very high ranking because you're getting matched to your teammate and he's been nowhere near Max's pace. The only race he's genuinely outpaced Max or been near his pace was Azerbaijan. And that was so good to see. I was rooting for Perez so hard that Grand Prix. In Miami, Max started however many places down and still finished in front. Same with Belgium. Started behind and finished way up the road. But I really do hope he finds his form in the second half of the year and puts it to Max in some races. But looking at the results so far, it's going to be unlikely. Next up, in 13th, I've got Nico Hulkenberg. Now, I know a few people are going to be surprised by this, considering how good he's been in qualifying, but it's just one of those things. When the car is as bad as it is in the race pace, it just doesn't give Nico the time to shine and really prove himself against the drivers ranked higher than him. He's had that awesome result in Australia in the race. Other than that, it's pretty much all been the qualifying work. Oh, and that amazing drive in the wet in the Austria sprint as well. But yeah, this rank for Nico, it's less about how good or bad he's done, and it's more just about not him being able to show his full potential. It's hard to rank him higher than this when we've only really had his qualifyings to look at. Next up, in 12th, I've got Carlos Sainz. This was a tough one for me. I don't feel like he's had a bad season, but I also don't feel like he's had a standout moment. My issue with Carlos is how much he's kind of lacked on pace in comparison to Leclerc. Yes, he is still one of the closest drivers to their teammates on the grid at the moment, but considering how well he did in 2021 and moments in 2022, I would have liked to have seen him close that gap even more to Charles this year. And most importantly, he hasn't finished on the podium yet. I think a lot of people are looking at Carlos's results of 4th and 6th and 5th and going, he's Mr. Consistent, which he is. He's done very, very well. But if you actually compare his race time to Leclerc in some of those races, it has been Leclerc getting shafted over by strategy, by safety cars and whatever else. People also talk about the championship, how close Sainz is to Leclerc, but you got to remember Leclerc had those 2 retirements right at the start. If it wasn't for those, he'd be smoking Sainz in the championship points. Again, I don't think Sainz has had a bad season, but I also don't think it's been his best. Now, in 11th, what I think will be probably my most controversial one of the list is Yuki Tsunoda. Now, before you go commenting, let me explain. Now, he started the season off amazingly, getting consistent 11th and 10th. But from Monaco onwards, he fell off a bit. Yes, those first 5 races were spectacular, but we don't know how good that car actually was because Nyck de Vries was in the other one. Then when Daniel came in Hungary and Belgium, we saw that the car isn't as bad as what we thought. So yeah, for me, Yuki's still up in the air. I don't know if he's having a good season or an average season. Again, there's definitely an argument to rank him higher, but that string of 6 races where he just disappeared don't make up for those other 6 races that he did really, really well in. Especially when you've got the teammate of Nyck de Vries. All right, moving on to the top 10 now. In 10th, I've got Pierre Gasly. Now, this might surprise some people. I don't think people would expect the Alpine drivers to be rated too high. But you've got to remember, this Alpine is in that midfield. You've got the Aston Martin, the Ferrari, the Mercedes, and the Red Bull ahead. That's 8 cars. Alpine are expected to be getting 9th and 10th places. And for the most part, that's exactly what they've been doing. And when they haven't, they've either had some stupid luck, some reliability issues, or they've just been on the edge of the points. And for me, over the course of the 12 races, Gasly has shown that he's been more consistent in getting that car to where I expect it to be in comparison to Yuki Tsunoda, who did have that 6 race fall off. The reason I didn't rate Gasly higher than his teammate is because he hasn't had that standout moment like Ocon. Yes, he did have that awesome sprint result in Belgium, but at the end of the day, it was just a sprint in changing conditions. It's not as good as Ocon's podium in Monaco. So with that said, moving on to 9th, I've got Esteban Ocon. Now, at one stage, I did have Gasly ranked higher than Ocon. Gasly actually has a higher average rating than Ocon as well, going off of my performance ratings I've done for every single Grand Prix this year. Now, they're very, very close, but after looking at the results back, Ocon has just edged him in more races. As I mentioned before, the Alpines have been very unlucky, but they've been doing their job, getting those consistent results just on the edge of points when they haven't been unlucky. And Ocon also had that spectacular weekend in Monaco where he got a lot of points for them in the constructors. So yeah, just a little bit better than Gasly, and overall I think both Alpines have been a bit more consistent than Yuki has over the course of the 12 races so far. If it wasn't for Alpine having those reliability issues and unluckiness, I honestly think people would be more appreciative of how well these drivers are actually doing. Nothing great, but doing well. All right, it's time for the big boys. In 8th, I've got George Russell. Now, George hasn't had a bad season by any means, but it's definitely not been his best. And that's why I've rated him the lowest out of this top end group. The Merc has been so up and down, but he's still not managed to get a podium, whilst Lewis, his teammate, has managed to get a few. If you look at Russell's result, very consistent, consistently in the points when he's not had a DNF, but most qualifyings and most races just lacking that pace on his teammate. There's just so many good performances this season, I can't edge him into the top 7. Next up, at 7th, I've got Charles Leclerc. Now, this was tough. I think Leclerc's having a pretty good season, but there's just 6 drivers ahead having a much better one. As I mentioned before when talking about Sainz, Leclerc's just edged Sainz most qualifyings and most races this year. Although his results haven't been as consistent, the races that he was meant to do well in, such as Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, he did get very unlucky with reliability problems. And he's finished on the podium 3 times, whereas Sainz still hasn't yet. Has it been Leclerc's best season? No. But has it been his worst? I'd say not either. Again, some people may look at results and say he deserves to be ranked lower. But if you look at the pace on paper in comparison to his teammate and the other drivers on the grid, especially considering how bad that Ferrari has been on race pace, I think he's done quite well. Next up, in 6th, I've got Oscar Piastri, the best rookie hands down this season. That McLaren looked so bad at the start of the season. Yeah, he was still getting some decent results with it, but as soon as that McLaren showed up in the last few races, he really delivered. And when you look at Piastri's qualifying and race results in comparison to Lando Norris being one of the best drivers on the grid as well, he's done so good, finishing only 1 place, 2 places behind him in every single Grand Prix. That's why when you look at these results, you know, a 15th, a 19th, a 13th, a 16th, it doesn't look too great on paper, but when you're comparing him to the likes of Lando Norris, he's done so well. Don't get me wrong, he's doing amazing for a rookie, but you know, a race like Hungary, he lacked a lot of pace, finishing behind Lewis and very, very far down on his teammate. For the most part, he has been behind Lando this season, apart from that one great sprint race in Belgium. But at the end of the day, he's had an amazing season so far, but I just don't think it's as good as the 5 people ranked in front of him. To think he's in 6th, rated higher than all the drivers behind as a rookie, that's insane. All right, time for my top 5. In 5th, I've got Alex Albon. Now, initially, I didn't have Albon ranked this high. I thought he had a bit of an overrated season. But then I remembered the Williams was so bad in the first 7 Grand Prix of the year. Yet he was still getting points in Bahrain and finishing just outside the points in the other races. Then once that upgrade package came, he had the best weekend he's ever had in Canada, and then getting some more points in Silverstone as well. Now, there is an argument he could be ranked higher than this, but he is getting compared to the likes of Logan Sargeant, who, as you've seen, I've ranked him 20th. When you've got a teammate like that, it is hard to have a spectacular season. Or maybe the reason Logan's just looking bad is because Albon's doing so good. Either way, Albon's had an amazing season so far. Now with the Williams getting better and better, I cannot wait to see this guy getting consistent points. Next up, in 4th, I've got Lando Norris. I don't know how many seasons now I've been rating this guy high. He just keeps on killing it season after season. Now, that McLaren looked bad in those first few races, but despite the car's struggles, he's had some awesome results since. That 6th place in Australia, and most importantly, those 2 podiums in Britain and Hungary, and a great result in Austria as well. I think once again, Lando is showing the level of driver that he is, and I cannot wait to see this car and how well they do for the rest of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up finishing 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. All right, it's top 3 time, and in my opinion, this is a solid top 3. I can't see there any reason not to be this as your top 3. So in 3rd, I've got Lewis Hamilton. He's having such a fantastic and consistent season, despite that car being so up and down. Races where they don't qualify well, he comes through the field nicely. Races where they qualify well, he holds position nicely. I mean, just look at his races. His worst result is an 8th at Austria, and even that's not terrible. When you look at Ferrari and Aston Martin, how up and down the results their drivers has had, and even Russell, how up and down his results have been. To think Lewis's worst result was an 8th, that's really, really good. He's also gotten 4 podiums. Some people may think this isn't Lewis's best season, so how can you rank him this high? But that doesn't mean Lewis isn't having an excellent season. The consistency is amazing. He's outpacing, outqualifying his teammate, and bringing home great results for the team, which should secure them 2nd in the Constructors by the end of the year. Next up, in 2nd place, of course, it is Fernando Alonso. What a season this guy's having. Despite the drop-off of the Aston Martin, he's still bringing home consistent results. 5 podiums in the first 6 races. consistently out-qualifying his teammate, much better race pace than his teammate, and overall just outclassing the other teams around him despite him being in a much slower car, in my opinion. I can't even imagine the season he'd be having if this Aston Martin hadn't have fallen off. And once again, it really goes to show how much Stroll is letting down the team. If Alonso is capable of these results, imagine another driver like him in that car. They'd be easily second in the constructors by the end of the year. So that leaves the one and only Max Verstappen. I mean, if this guy isn't first on your rankings for this year, then you're delusional. He's finished He's finished top 2 in every single race this year. The 2 races he hasn't won. One race being Saudi Arabia. In qualifying, he messed up his banker, and then the engine broke down. He had to start the race from 15th, and he still finished 2nd. And the only race this year where a driver has outpaced him was Azerbaijan. Some would argue it was the dirty air. I honestly think Perez did a very, very good job. I don't think Max felt comfortable that weekend, and Perez capitalized on it. But still, he finished 2nd. His worst weekend of the year was 2nd. Max has been getting consistent 9.5 and 10 ratings for me all year round. And it's scary to think that he might go on for the rest of the season and win all 10 races. He is just that strong. If his season continues like this, it will go down as one of the greatest seasons for a driver in all of Formula 1 history. So yeah, let's see if he can close it out as strong as he started it. So that wraps up my mid-season rankings. Let me know down below in the comments who you would rank higher, who you'd rank lower. At the end of the day, these are just my opinions and the way I see Formula 1 and how people are performing. But yeah, that's it for today's video. If you did enjoy, hit the like button down below and subscribe for more content like this. And yeah, thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.